Merry Christmas and welcome to another episode of Wrestling Tonight, live from No Cell Studios. I'm the Ace of Tavern, Acefield Retro, and joined on this Monday evening with the one bad Chad himself. What's going on, man?
Not a whole lot, man. We're on the verge of World's End, the new pay-per-view from AEW. It's always fun to hear to get some new wrestling. I think they knocked it out of the park with Wrestle Dream. So we'll see how they do with World's End. And we have a bunch of free agents kind of floating in the open market. And we've got a possible merger that could affect a lot of things. So there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of good stuff in the quick hitters. Excited to be back and hope you guys have a good Christmas, man. If you're listening on the day we dropped the video, Merry Christmas.
Yeah, I hope everyone was, recipient of a great gift from Santa in some capacity. But all we know is we're continuing to get endless supplies of pro wrestling. That bag that Santa has is just endless. And you mentioned World's End. This is the inaugural version of it, man. I'm really looking forward to previewing it here. And just at the top of this episode, we do want to say we are recording in advance. We are indeed human, so we are taking a little bit of a break. Of course, we're trying to jam-pack a lot of the recording here, so we're not missing a beat. Of course, we want to bring you the content that you know and love, but some of the stuff for the previews, and there might be stuff that happens from now until you're listening to this, so just keep that in mind. But we're going to keep you guys covered from top to bottom with all the news, a lot of great stuff going down, and like we said, the wrestling news cycle never sleeps, and here we are on Wrestling Tonight, really approaching the end of the year, because that's aside from all the other conversation, we made it through 52 weeks, and every single week you and I have been here discussing wrestling news.
Yeah, 52 weeks. The next episode will be bringing you guys our year-end awards, the tourneys, which will be dropping Jan 1, which kicks off year 2 of Wrestling Tonight. So excited to have you guys along for the ride, and we might as well drop it here. We've been teasing it across all platforms, especially the flagship. We've been teasing changes to the tavern. If you guys are watching, if you're listening in your Apple or Spotify, we are doing a Patreon, Turnbuckle Tavern Patreon. It's going to be cheaper than a truck stop cup of coffee. So we hope you guys come along for the ride. We'll release a lot more details, but it's coming January 1st. We'll be opening up the Patreon for all of our tavern townies who want to come on, support the show, and get a bunch of cool exclusive free content and get the same content you've come to know, plus more. We're trying to up the ante for you guys. You know, we like to grow here. We don't like to rest on our laurels at the tavern. We're quietly the hardest working indie wrestling podcast foundation that's out there. So at least we like to think we are. So hope you guys enjoy what we do. And we really want to see you guys come along for the ride over at Patreon.
Absolutely. I'm very excited. We've been discussing this for quite some time. Of course, the first ever, launch of this is going to yield a lot of awesome results. I think I'm looking forward to the exclusive content. Who knows what else is going to be out there, and the interaction with those closest to us here at the Turnbuckle Tavern, the townies as we call them. And we hope you guys join us over there and listen to what we're bringing. And there will be some new things. So just keep that in mind. You'll be getting way more than $2.99 worth. And we were discussing it before. It's a subscription that will keep on giving. So I look at it as an opportunity for growth, of course, but it also gives us the freedom and creativity to capture more ears, because as we know, sometimes on this video platform that we know as YouTube finds a way to mask us and keep us away from some people. So, new and old, we're looking forward to bring the wrestling news and wrestling discussion at large and keeping that conversation going, a healthy discussion where the wrestling world continues to cultivate amazing moments.
Yeah, 12 quarters, guys. 12 quarters is all it takes. I mean, I lose 12 quarters in my couch, I feel like if you enjoy what we do, if you enjoy all the personalities here at the tavern, I'm sure you do, come along for the ride, man. $2.99. It's going to be fun. And there will be a lot of exclusive stuff, a lot of early drops for people. And the audio, all the audio on Apple and Spotify will remain 100% free. You'll still be able to get all of that with no caveats. But I think, something me and Hawk have even talked about, we're going to AEW Revolution in March. Maybe we shoot a little vlog. So things like that, different one-offs where we're not kind of stuck to a schedule. You know, all of our shows, we try to do them consistently every week for you guys, like Wrestling Tonight. But this will give us the opportunity to do little one-offs. Maybe Ace shoots some footage at Remarkable Wrestling. You never know what'll pop up on there.
Yeah, and the thing is, keep this in mind. Hawk with no restrictions of YouTube and everything with the censorship there. So you never know what you're going to see with Hawk being unleashed on a travel vlog. But all joking aside, things like that, building a community is what it's always been about. And we have a strong community here, and I'm confident that they're going to be traveling over back to Patreon with us and help us expand and invest back into what we're doing, because that's how it's going to grow into really this healthy wrestling community that we know and love. So I'm looking forward to what 2024 has in store for us.
Absolutely, man. I'm excited.
So let's get into big story number one and talk about what's happening in the ring.
Big stories. Story 1.
So, of course, we have to preview one more big event before we say goodbye to 2023, and it's AEW World's End. So it's coming from Long Island, New York, Nassau Veterans Memorial Coliseum, Uniondale, the former home of the New York Islanders, also a stone's throw from the home of the defending AEW World Champion MJF. And this event, as you mentioned before, it's the first iteration of World's End. We saw this copyright earlier in the year, similar to Wrestle Dream, which brought a different flavor to the pay-per-view schedule. I expect this to be a big event treated as such, and I'm looking forward to, of course, we're going to preview the matches, but what they bring as far as setting this apart from the Revolutions, from the Double or Nothings, what's going to make this stand out? Because I know Wrestle Dream felt like it stood out of the catalog, and I'm sure World's End will have the same sort of feel.
And I think the first thing that they've really kind of set this event apart, if we're to assume moving forward, World's End will stay kind of at the end of December, capping off the year. And if we are to assume that the C2, the Continental Classic, stays at the end of the year, this will probably become known as the place where we culminate the winter every year. So this kind of has a historic relevancy to it if we're expecting the Continental Classic to become one of those stalwart tournaments in pro wrestling. This will be the place where that champion is crowned. So to be able to buy the pay-per-view and watch history be made by a champion being crowned, I think that's a pretty cool emphasis to watch the event.
And we know the AEW pay-per-view product always stacks the card. It makes an event. So if you have friends over, you know it's going to be wall-to-wall wrestling. But the matches we have in front of us right now to discuss, most importantly, let's go with the main match. It's been built up for over 2 months, 3 months, if you really count everything else that's gone into it. The AEW World Championship, MJF against Samoa Joe. And a lot has gone into this. We've seen layers of this story, definitely blurred with the Devil storyline. Of course, Samoa Joe dropping the ROH TV Championship in pursuit of MJF. And we saw these guys have a match in New York, a stone's throw away, Grand Slam at Arthur Ashe Stadium. And this is an interesting match. You and I were discussing this a few weeks back when they announced it. You know, initially, of course, everyone looks at this as quote unquote, MJF's not re-signed. This is the end of his contract. He could go elsewhere, and they're trying to build some drama there. And you and I have been strong believers that MJF is going nowhere. He's the franchise player. I guess there's always the chance because, you know, this is pro wrestling and people come and go as we continue to see throughout this year, ending the year, beginning in the year. But to me, man, the other really interesting dynamic is no matter what, Samoa Joe feels like he could walk out of World's End, Long Island, New York, as the world champion. It would not be shocking to me. And I almost kind of expect him to, which is wild to say.
Yeah, and going into this, we have the looming injuries of MJF that kind of add to that narrative of it making sense if Joe takes this title. I don't think it makes sense, at least in storyline wise, of what we think they're building towards, because it feels to me like the Devil, whoever the Devil is destined to take this title from him. That seems like the story we're being told. But stories take different turns. They go down different roads. Maybe this is a part of that story. I mean, hell, for all we know, Joe is the Devil. I don't think he is, but we have no real idea of what they're going to use this devil angle to really pull something from. So anything's on the table here. I think Joe could win. My gut is telling me that MJF walks out of this with a title. I think the one thing, MJF did give the interview where he said he is not signed to AEW. And I think if you leave this event, because they have a match coming up this Wednesday where Joe and MJF are putting the ROH titles on the line against two of the Devil's Masked Men. If they drop those ROH tag titles and he drops the heavyweight title to Samoa Joe at World's End, I think you're going to get a lot of scuttlebutt from the IWC that's saying, see, they're clearing the path for him to leave the company. I think that's going to be a big narrative that Tony Khan will have to deal with coming out of this event if that happens. So I don't think he drops the title here, but that's me and Snee were talking about it on the flagship. That's what makes this event so compelling is there are a lot of moving parts moving around just the match itself. There's a lot of things that are coming into play. The injuries, the contract, the devil, all of that comes into play, which makes this very, very hard to predict in my mind.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I am going with the prediction that Samoa Joe's winning this title. And it's not because MJF is leaving. I think a matter of fact, he's staying and he's going to be signed long-term. I think eventually down the line, maybe 6-7 years from now, he will find a home in WWE, but not now. I think he's going to be in AEW and I think he's going to be staying there. And yeah, the conversation may be cropped up if he loses this title at World's End and everyone's going to have the conversation, but it's not necessarily a bad conversation to have. It builds drama and it also breeds unpredictability. And to have a champion like Joe standing tall at the end of the pay-per-view, that's as unpredictable as it gets. And I think they looked at the November date to pass Jon Moxley as the longest reigning champion. Or Kenny Omega was Kenny Omega was the longest reigning champion. They were waiting for that date. And once they passed the date, I feel like all bets are off. And now any given time with a valuable and a valid contender, MJF could be losing this championship. And if you look at the way Samoa Joe has been booked, it's a hard sell outside of having outside interference, which feels way too predictable for the devil to cost Samoa Joe his shot at the title because he wants to be the one, he or she wants to be the one to take the title off of MJF. I just don't see a world where Joe loses again, especially with how, he was choked out at Grand Slam. And if you want to keep Joe as a valuable main eventer, I think he almost has to win. And I understand wins and losses aren't everything, but eventually he loses this shot. He's never floating to the top of the card again to win the championship. I just don't see it happening. This is a kind of time and place thing. There's no other time to strap the rocket to Samoa Joe and have him get that championship run that he really never got anywhere else but ROH. I mean, he had it in TNA, but this is a huge stake for him. Like, this is almost the missing piece in that gem for him, where in WWE, he was not given the opportunity. And I think they laid seeds for that with his MJF promo talking about WWE never believed in him. And
it's true.
I think they laid it out there for it to happen. And even if it's a short run, we've seen these AEW championship runs be pretty lengthy outside of, like outside circumstances and injuries ending runs. But, Samoa Joe could have a run and we definitely could see MJF win it back. It's not to say that he loses the championship and then doesn't get it back. We could see this kind of, twist and turn and the devil could play a part. I think at the end of the day, we're going to see the devil play a part, but I think Joe wins this championship.
I think that what you just said about the devil playing a part, I think the devil could play a part to screw Joe out of that championship and
100%.
Still keep Joe strong too. That's totally on the table. I could see a world where Joe wins and drops it 4 weeks later to a Wardlow. You know what I mean? Like, anything is open and possible in what we're dealing with right now.
Well, before we move on from just that point, do you see, even this devil storyline has kind of overtaken the MJF stuff, and it's almost, dare I say, bigger than the championship. Does the title need to be wrapped up in this? Is it almost igniting the fire to make MJF and the devil feud light up even further because it's bigger than the championship? This has become personal to MJF as a human being, and the title gets put elsewhere, and then you could focus on MJF's path back to the title, because we know the babyface pursuit for someone like MJF will kind of even get him hotter than he's already as far as the popularity. it kind of, we've always talked about Stone Cold Steve Austin. His pursuit of the championship was much better than him holding the championship.
I definitely think it's a story that has legs where they could get it to a point where it doesn't need that world title to be who is the devil. That story could kind of stand on its own. But having said that, they have laid groundwork to me that it is, whoever this devil is, it is all about the world title, because it's seeming to me that the devil does not want anyone else to beat MJF. The devil wants to be the one to take that title. That's every challenger, every adversary that he's had has gotten jumped, from Jay White in the lead up to, Full Gear, to we saw Hangman get the brunt of it. Joe's been kind of targeted a little bit. So it just seems like something with this belt is of importance to the devil. Now, just to go back to a point you made, Ace, about Joe, if he loses here, could he get back to a point to be a viable world title contender? The only thing that I push back on that is AEW seems like a company where the people that would traditionally be in that world title hunt aren't always up there. I look at Bryan Danielson. I think he's a guy that doesn't want to hold that title. I don't think he needs that title. Sure, when you look down the title lineage of the AEW world title, it would look pretty awesome with the American Dragon being one of those title holders. Same thing with Joe. But this company kicked off its beginning with a stipulation that kept arguably their biggest star out of the world title picture. They kicked this company off with one of the early feuds, preventing Cody Rhodes from ever being a world champion. And it seemed like, hey, we don't just make steps and go back on them. That was kind of a set in stone thing, at least the way they pushed it, that he would never vie for that. A lot of people say the TNT title kind of came out of that. Like, we got to give him some gold. And, Cody ended up leaving because he felt like he didn't, he'd reached the ceiling here, and he wanted to go chase, the ghost of his father and win the belt that his dad never did. So that's the only thing with Joe. It's like, in any other company, he is a guy who should be in that world title mix. And this is his second go at the champion, which makes me think, like, you can't have this guy get beat twice by MJF. Right. That's why I think if he gets beat twice, it's got to be at the hands of the devil screwing him in some way, shape, or form. But I don't think it hurts Joe. I think Joe's doing some of the best stuff he's done in a long time right now. I think after he dropped that TV title, I think that was pretty much him dedicating his entire time to the AEW roster. Now he's a mainstay figure, and some of the promos he's cut with MJF has been very, very impressive. But the little voice in the back of my mind that agrees with you about him winning, you definitely are 100% right. When they did that promo and they alluded to WWE putting him in a poncho at WrestleMania to do commentary, and they never believed in him to be a top guy, that does make me pause and think, like, Tony's going to go the way he did with Sting, where he felt that Sting was done wrong and he gave Sting this legendary retirement push. Are we going to see him put the title on Joe and say, hey, they didn't respect you over there, but we see you as a guy, as a top guy? So there's a lot of moving parts here, man, that makes me think,
Yeah, I don't think it would make Joe lesser than in the fans' eyes if he was to lose. I just looking at the cycle, the way things are booked. You mentioned Bryan Danielson getting those shots at the championship. It feels like it's a momentum thing as far as storytelling and how it's gone. You can see swinging back in the direction, but the pendulum's going to go back the other way. And I think time and space is not going to let Joe ever have this opportunity again, because someone else is going to pretty much fill that void. If we're on the understanding that MJF is going to retain this title, if we go that path and the devil costs him this championship, I think the only way fans would be okay if that happens, because it feels way too predictable to have a masked man come in and cost, because I feel like we've seen it over and over again. I think we need the reveal then. You need to sit there, have this person cost Samoa Joe the championship and stare over MJF and attack MJF, pull it off, and it's Adam Cole, go off the air. I think that could be the moment, whatever it is, viral or not. I think that could help people, because I think the end of the show to have interference, it doesn't feel like an AEW pay-per-view. It always feels like for them, they need to go off with a bang. And I think if MJF wins, the caveat is we're going to get the reveal of the devil, whoever it is.
Unless you go that traditional route of what's more of a bait to watch Dynamite than who screwed Joe, who is this guy? Because we've seen a lot of his minions, and we've seen him up on the Contron, and we saw him step out of the car when they jumped Hangman, but we have yet to really see the devil get physical. If the devil in physical form comes out and screws him, I mean, we've been talking this to death on the flagship. Do you reveal it here? Like, does the devil get revealed at World's End? I think there's a world where it feels like we definitely could see something revealed here. Or there's a world where if they wanted to, it's only 8 Dynamites away until we get to Revolution. They could push this until Revolution. I always really like the visual of the devil does one of those written challenges on the Contron, say, hey, I want a shot at your title at Revolution. And the devil comes out with the mask, and right before the bell rings, he unmasks, and holy shit, it's Adam Cole, and MJF has to deal with that during the match. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can go with this. And what do you think, Ace? Do you think if you were betting money, if you're a betting man, you're laying your money on the line, do we come out of World's End knowing who the devil is?
Well, I'm going to say no, because I have hope that idea that you had will come to fruition, because forget what is in Tony's mind. That's what should happen, because I think the drama of this devil standing across the ring and the reveal, that's a moment, and it's all about wrestling moments. And to have that, and just the mental mind games and the gymnastics that MJF has to get through to defend the championship, that's the story itself. And I think this match is going to determine what direction they're going, obviously, championship or otherwise, but this is a crossroads for them. And I think it's going to tell a lot as far as who is the devil, because it's like we're on the assumption it's going to be Adam Cole and we're going to be happy with it. We haven't even touched on the part that it could be someone we're not happy with. It could be someone that's going to be a disappointing reveal, and it could make this kind of one of those situations where it's a deflating reaction from the fans. And there's a lot of stake. There's a lot of eggs in this basket. You know, for me, like if I had to put my desire on what I want to happen, I personally want to see Joe with the championship, just as a selfish, from a fandom side of things. I want Joe to have a run.
That's that brace for impact coming out in you.
For sure. And I think also Joe on this stage, I love what he's done. You mentioned before, just seeing this side of him. He's had some of the best promo work, some of the best in-ring work we've seen, a renaissance of sorts for him, of course, because it seemed like his in-ring career was almost coming to an end, and now we're almost getting the best version of him, especially in the later years and comparable to his ROH side of things. I'm very excited for the Joe thing, and I fear that he would just be a cog in the story, and I don't like that. And I think there's a way to do the MJF story with the devil without the title, but as you said before, we got to figure out what is the MO of this devil. Is it about the championship, or is it about MJF himself? Is it about robbing MJF of whatever he holds dear? Who knows? We haven't really got that, but it seems to me, if you're following the tea leaves, as cliche as it is, every time someone gets close to the championship, they take him out, and it all traces back. All those red strings go back to Adam Cole, who just came up short multiple times against MJF.
And the thing I love about this story, and I think some fans, if you have a touch of the Fed brain and you see the way, you know, we've all grown up knowing how McMahon books, and a lot of his booking is very, you know, you'll have a program with 2 guys, they'll go however long it goes, and then that will end and something new will begin. And it's very clear, concise, simple storytelling. And I think that is a very successful way to book wrestling. I mean, who am I to say that? It's obvious. McMahon is so successful in the way he tells his stories like that. But I do think there is an avenue where I think certain fans with a touch of that Fed brain may think that this story is convoluted. There's too many moving parts. But as a diehard fan of storytelling in all mediums, whether it's film, TV, books, whatever, I think Tony is trying to tap into that Game of Thrones type of storytelling where and that's what has pulled me into this story the most, is all the moving parts, and they don't feel like just bit players in a bigger story. I feel like everyone involved in this story feels to me like they have a role to play. I don't know what Samoa Joe's role is at this point. Maybe he's just a contender like Jay White was, but then you look at the way they, Roddy Strong and the Kingdom have been at the core of this story. They're going to come into play. These vignettes we've been getting with Wardlow, something is in that. That's going to come into play. They introduced and teased us with an incredible future feud in Swerve and MJF meeting. Hangman got brought back in. Like, there's a lot of moving pieces here, and they're doing such a good job of trying to get you to think maybe he's the devil, maybe he's the devil. And it all kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Every person has a reason why they could be the devil. But at the core of it, the fact that Adam Cole is out with this injury and he's not there, that to me is the biggest red flag of all.
Yep.
Like that's the biggest, most glaring one. And let's be honest, man, you could do some classic Swerve. I think you run a high risk, like you said, of being disappointed by pulling some rando to unmask. But when it comes to just the base story of what you're telling, I think it has to be Adam Cole. Like, and I don't, just to kind of answer the question I posed to you, I don't think the devil reveals himself. I think there's a very real possibility that one of his henchmen get revealed. I think there's something cool if it is exposed that Wardlow works for the devil, or some person is under one of these masks, and that gives us good story in the weeks after World's End, where we're wondering, like, now we have a face with this faction, and they know who the devil is, and they tease us with who the devil is. You could get some good week-to-week storytelling out of that. So I think we could get a big reveal. I think 100% we're going to get something from the devil, but I'm not convinced we get the devil's identity at World's End.
And I think going back to what you're saying about this idea of how wrestling's supposed to be booked and how we've been trained for it to be booked, wrestling fans are comfortable with their stories being in neat little boxes, and the world title feud is here and they never cross. And you might see a tag team match where they're tagging together, but they're going to make it clear that this person's not concerned with that person. And we want to make sure that each of the arrows are going in one direction. But with AEW, they're kind of bucking the trend of that with this living, breathing ecosystem, this living environment where at any moment, momentum can bump into it and move him in a different direction. As we're seeing with Swerve, he moves his direction from Hangman to MJF, and it's not just about the championship. It's about that he's focusing on everybody because his momentum is strong and he's building confidence. So this is a story, an example of, using the example of cinema, a movie like Reservoir Dogs, where the plot obviously unfolds in front of your eyes as you're watching the movie. But if you watch it from the lens of seeing it already, the answer is right in front of your face. And I think this is going to be one of those stories where, as we're watching, you can go back and watch highlight clips and watch moments where it's always been right there in front of us and it's very obvious. And sometimes that's the best answer. I think the swerve for the swerve's sake, and I mean, like, changing the story, not Swerve Strickland, is not a good thing, because even though Adam Cole would be predictable and it feels like the obvious choice from the beginning, when it first happened, everyone's like, of course, that's going to be the person. But just because it's predictable doesn't mean it's not the right person. I think they've done enough, of a good job to put some color dye into the water to mix it up, and all this deception in different directions, where everyone at least has these anecdotal conversations of, I think it's Jack Perry, I think it's Tony Khan, I think it's Swerve Strickland, I think it's MJF himself. And at the very least, that conversation has created a buzz where the story, especially as it unfolds, feels like a really big deal. And I think everyone involved in it will benefit, as you said. And that's how momentum's built.
Yep.
And as we continue to go in the directions, we've been looking for an identity for Wardlow following his face turn. We've been looking for an identity for Jack Perry as he turned heel. This might be the answer where everyone can kind of grow legs from this story and branch off.
Well said. Well said. The one thing that keeps the voice in my head is Sneed on the flagship, he said, are we really going to know who the devil is in 10 days? Does that feel right to you that in 10 days we will know who it is? And I got to be honest, it doesn't feel right. I know there's a lot of fans. It's like I see on social media, they're like, they should have already revealed him. And I'm like,
have some patience. Like, why do we need stuff
Yeah.
this gratification right instantly? Let's have some patience, guys.
Yeah, it's the instant gratification generation where no, man, like once he's revealed, it's over. The story changes. This like compelling whodunit mystery that they've built is done. And it'll be a minute before you can't go back into the whodunit bag of tricks and throw that on a new story. Once you tell the masked man story, it's going to be a couple years before anything like this will rear its head again in AEW. And I'm really enjoying this masked man whodunit. It's a classic wrestling trope, but we've yet to see something like this in AEW. And I'm not ready to step off this ride yet. I'm having fun with this ride.
So we also have the AEW Women's Championship going down here. Toni Storm defending against Rio. Of course, timeless Toni Storm is on this run of the lifetime. This reinvention of her character is definitely one of the bigger stories in 2023. And talk about most improved dramatically in a direction that has really helped rejuvenate the women's division. Putting the title on her is the obvious choice. Not much to really discuss this match as far as any story that's developing. This feels like a title defense for Toni Storm and a rightful one, successful in that. So the match will be great. I think, Riho definitely has legacy here, former women's champion herself. But this is timeless Toni Storm, and she continues to roll. And that's really the story here.
Yeah, I think she continues to roll. This is just another, a hash mark on her title reign. She's the hottest. Her and Julia Hart are the two hottest talents they have right now. We saw Thunder Rosa return recently. I do think this championship, there's a possibility we could see a return. We could see Toni Storm's next feud spark up because it just seems like one of those matches where there isn't a ton of like story between Riho and Toni here. So Britt could make a return. We don't know where Jamie Hayter's at in her. Jamie Hayter, people forget about her, man. She was the champ. She was over and she's gone. She's been gone since well before All In. We thought she was going to be the champion going into All in London, and she gets hurt. So there's even the possibility that Mariah May could be getting heated up into a feud with Toni. They've been teasing it a little bit. Maybe she's the person to eventually take that title off of Toni. I think they're high on Mariah May. I think Tony's brought her in for a reason. But yeah, I think this is just a blip on the radar for Toni. I think the only thing that may happen, we may see someone come in and issue a challenge to set off the next feud, because here's the thing, man, it's not like we've got these 3-4 month gaps in between shows anymore. As soon as World's End ends, we've got 8 Dynamites until we get to Revolution. So I think we could see a lot of story popping off on this pay-per-view.
Yeah, and I think, as you said before, I'm interested to see what Toni Storm brings to the table throughout 2024, because we know the championship eventually is coming off her. Does she have a streetcar named Desire breakdown? We're going to get this dramatic entry into this, maybe take the comedic edge off the character and turn her into this heel character. Really, it's an endless list of possibilities with the character because it's so well done and well developed. And in wrestling, the best characters are the ones where people feel invested, and Toni Storm really feels invested in what she's doing here, to the fact where it doesn't even seem like the same person who was on our screen a mere year ago. So
no,
I'm very excited for this run. And as we said, she's retaining here, but setting the stage and helping take the women's division into a direction where it's in much better shape in her hands right now with her as champion than it was, even 4 months ago. And I think they're moving in a direction where a nice, meaningful feud with Toni Storm being set up here after Riho, whether it be Britt Baker or Mariah May or whatever it may be. I just hope they continue to tell meaningful story down the line instead of like the piecemeal we were getting, back when Saraya was champion. And, it just feels like we're moving in the right direction. The arrow's pointing upward.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I have a lot of faith in the women's division right now. I think they've really been hitching their wagons to two very unique characters in Julia Hart and Tony Storm. And with Thunder Rosa returning and knowing that, Britt and Jamie Hayter are out there, I think as long as they kind of take that storytelling that they give to the men and start putting it into the women's stories, I think there's a bright future ahead for the women's division.
So we also have the AEW Tag Team Championship match that was supposed to happen. Of course, Ricky Starks and Big Bill were going to be defending against Chris Jericho and Kenny Omega. But as we covered in depth last week, Kenny Omega out for an indefinite amount of time with diverticulitis, recovering, released from a hospital bed. It seems like he's on the up and up, but as far as in-ring action, it's going to be some time until we see him in an AEW ring. The question is, as of Friday night before Christmas, as we're recording this, there's no opponents lined up. We are, of course, recording this before Saturday's Collision. It is entirely possible that we have opponents lined up at this point. With Ricky Starks and Big Bill defending their championship, it feels like they're going to. We jokingly threw out the Outrunners as a viable contender, but the tag division certainly has teams that could step up and take them on. But this is definitely one of those moments you have to pivot, and the match feels lesser than, because as limited and people, as poor as the build was with the Golden Jets and Big Bill and Ricky Starks, it still was build. And now you kind of have to pivot on a dime and figure out something else to do. And to me, it felt like the Golden Jets were destined to win the championship belt. So do they continue to have them Ricky Starks and Big Bill? Do you go in a direction and put them on somebody else? And because to me, like, if I was following the storyboard, I think eventually, both the TNT championship feud and the tag team championship stuff are going to be intertwined, because I think we were going to have the Golden Jets go on a run, and then maybe we see Edge and Christian reunite to take the titles off of them. But it seems like, an all Canadian type of main event feel is going in a different direction, but we'll see. I would see Ricky Starks and Big Bill retaining against whoever they're taking on, unless they pop a big name and get them in there. But definitely we're going to see Tony's creative side of having to pivot.
Yeah. In my mind, there's three pivots he can make here. He can go the pivot of just injecting a fresh tag team, whether that's the Guns stumbling their way into this, like just some random new challenger. That's one pivot. I think that's probably the least interesting, maybe the most likely though. The other pivot you could make is Kenny's longtime friend, Kota Ibushi, steps in with Jericho to vie for the tag titles. I think that's a big possibility. And the other possibility is two teams that have kind of peripherally been involved with Ricky and Big Bill, not as recently, but there's another possibility that one of the feuds going into this kind of gets absorbed into this tag title situation, and we have House of Black and FTR make it a triple threat for the tag titles. So
yeah, I could see that happening too, but I was thinking about when this happened, as you said, Chris Jericho finding a new partner, and I know they kind of teased it. They really focused on Chris Jericho giving an update. It didn't feel like it was going in that direction on Dynamite. But if you think back to the early 2000s, Ruthless Aggression, when Los Guerreros were in this run, they were supposed to be taking on the world's greatest tag team, Shelton Benjamin and Charlie Haas, in a tag team championship match. And I guess the titles were supposed to go on Los Guerreros, but Chavo got hurt. They put Tajiri in the match night of it, and they put the titles on Tajiri and Eddie Guerrero, and they had a very memorable run. And as an oddball tag team as it was, it worked. So maybe they find a silver lining. You mentioned Kota, but it could be someone else with maybe Action Andretti. Like, I don't know, find someone and toss them with Chris Jericho and have them win the titles. If that was what you were originally intending, and getting the titles off Starks and Big Bill, if that was always the path, maybe he sticks with that, Tony being that, and figure out what he's going to do creatively. Because there's an interesting thing you can do, and anyone with Chris Jericho, it could be interesting.
And there's always the possibility that we go Jericho against Ricky Starks again, but I don't think they retread that. I think Ricky Starks and Big Bill have to be defending these titles at World's End.
So we mentioned the TNT Championship match, Adam Copeland versus Christian Cage in a no DQ match. This is not official, according to AEW.com and also on Wikipedia. Match is not official, but we've been watching wrestling long enough to know that this match feels like it's going to happen, because Adam Copeland did challenge him. Christian Cage has not accepted the challenge, but I fully expect we're going to be getting this match with a little more zest on it than we originally got with the match that happened on Dynamite. But as we mentioned before, I think the story continues to unfold with both Adam Copeland and Christian. And this is multi-layered. No matter where the championship winds up laying and whoever shoulder it winds up being on, doesn't matter. I think inevitably we're getting to Adam Copeland and Christian Cage teaming up, and what a moment it's going to be. It's going to take a while to get there because they have to do a lot of untangling of Christian Cage. Because, I mean, he's definitely a viable contender for heel of the year. And he's one of those guys. I mean, the mic work he's doing, the damaging thing he's saying about people's fathers and passed away loved ones. I mean, Christian Cage continues to crush it. So if they want to have this feel good moment with Adam Copeland and Christian Cage, it's going to take a lot to get there. I hope they're not underselling that for themselves.
Yeah. And I don't think this wraps this up because
no, it's going to be a bit to get there.
Yeah, it's going to be a bit. I would be shocked if Adam Copeland ends up winning this title. I think he gets screwed again. I think they consistently keep that title off of him. I think this keeps going. And I think we get some big grudge match, blow off match at Revolution between the two, where maybe he does end up winning the belt. But I think we're a long ways away from them tagging. And, the Continental Classic has kind of put this feud a bit on the back burner. It hasn't been so front and center because prior to the C2 kicking off, I mean, this storyline was getting massive segments on TV. So I think this match is definitely happening at the event, though.
So we also have the AEW Continental Classic Finals. So just to build some context here, of course, and I'll give you guys the update on the standings in a second, but a three-way match will determine the Continental Classic Gold League winner. So Jay White got a win over John Moxley on Wednesday's Dynamite. So then we also taking on Swerve Strickland. They all have 12 points, which now has a three-way tie at the top. So the winner of the match will face the Blue League winner. Is going to be determined next Wednesday at AEW's World's Ends on December 30th. So more context for that. Swerve defeated Roosh on Wednesday to earn 3 more points, earning him up to 12. The other Gold League match on the show had Mark Briscoe defeating Jay Lethal to earn his only 3 points of the tournament. Lethal ends the Gold League with 0 points. So as of record time, like I said, we have Collision tomorrow night. We have the Blue League final matches. Everyone in that league except for Daniel Garcia is still alive. So Bryan Danielson is going to be taking on Claudio. Andrade is going to be taking on Eddie Kingston. And we have Brody King taking on Daniel Garcia. So I guess this is where the hypothesizing and predicting comes into play here, Chad. And we have to figure out where they're going. A match that we did not talk about, but is heavily implied, is Miro and Andrade, especially with Andrade involved in Continental Classic. But that means that if they're feuding and they may have a payoff at World's End, maybe you kind of pull Andrade out. But I feel like, man, the two top contenders for me feel like Bryan Danielson and Andrade, but you can't take Eddie Kingston out of the field because of his titles being thrown into the middle of the pot.
Yeah, that's the wrench, because Eddie started the tournament off with 2 losses. And he's slowly been putting together wins. He's put 2 together. He's got Andrade. If he knocks Andrade off, he steps up into that position. And like you said, he put his titles, that New Japan Strong open weight title and that Ring of Honor world title, he put those on the line. So I feel like I could see him getting into that semifinal match against Danielson. If I gunned ahead, it's either I think Danielson comes out of the Blue League. I think this was kind of Tony's gift to him since he couldn't go into the G1. I think it's going to be Danielson. And if I had to pick, I'm thinking it's either Mox or it's Swerve. That's what my gut's telling me. I would be shocked if Jay White made it in, but he could. You never know.
So as a record time, again, you guys, we don't know, but you guys know as you're listening to this, my opinion on Saturday, Bryan Danielson's going to beat Claudio, and I think Eddie Kingston's going to beat Andrade. Brody's going to beat Garcia, but it's not going to be enough to get him out there. So I think we would have a 3-way tie. But, as far as the finals at World's End, man, I honestly think there's a lot of different ways they can go. But we talk about Swerve, we talk about Moxley, we talk about Danielson. They've really created a wide net of potential winners and big match feels. Any of those combinations feel like it could, feel like this big match moment where, similar to the Swerve match with Moxley, where we got the holy shit chance of them standing across the ring, a la at Grand Slam, Kenny Omega versus Bryan Danielson. we may get a moment like that could feel very, very large. And that's the biggest thing, man. The C2 is feeling like it's very important on the first year. Whatever the stakes are, it doesn't matter. It just feels like just the standings and the momentum that's built. And I hope they can ride this wave throughout the rest of the winter into early spring and all of that, because that's important as we continue to talk about storytelling and tying them into different things. The Continental Classic has been this solar eclipse on a lot of the storytelling because it doesn't have any place to live. With G1, they have the shows for it to live where you can kind of have the stories being told. They interweave it because the world champions and the champions are definitely involved, like the Okadas of the world. Like this year, Sonata was involved in it as well. You can involve them in the storytelling. And I think over time, AEW is going to learn how to do this. And they have to indoctrinate and ease the American audience into it, because I think the American audience, as we discussed before, with the way booking is done, there's a lot of undoing they have to do to get them used to things because they're so resistant to change. And tournaments are one of them. They have a very hard time with round robin. It's not traditional to American sports. Even it's a European soccer concept. So just throw that on top of just this misconception of that FedBring puts into people's head. I think we have a mixed bag where they have to get used to it. But I think the round robin model works so much better than single elimination.
Oh, 100%. I'm all about round robin tournaments in pro wrestling. It's the only way to go. I think one of the things that's not being talked about, I don't hear anyone talk about this. The C2 poses a very tricky obstacle for World's End in the fact that, okay, you've got your two finalists that are going to World's End to determine who becomes the champion, but you have essentially taken 16 guys and put them in this tournament, and it's pretty big names. So say it's Swerve and Danielson. You mean to tell me Mox isn't going to be on the World's End card?
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, say it's Mox. You mean to tell me as hot as Swerve is, he's not going to have a match at World's End? Like, they're so wrapped up in this tournament, there is no other story. So I'm very interested to see how they can go into this event with leaving guys like Moxley on the table, possibly without an opponent for World's End. Is there any world, I haven't really dug deep into the points situation, but is there any world we live in where could we get a triple threat at World's End for the C2? Is that a possibility?
I don't think so, because on Wednesday we're going to get the winner of the three at the top of the Gold League.
What if that goes to a draw?
I guess that's possible. Yeah.
You know what I
right.
mean? Like,
are they going to put a
what?
time limit with it? Because we know with triple threat matches, they have a different, I mean, I guess the tournament is the tournament. They have to have the time limit on it. So you're right. I guess it could go that way. And
like, if there's a clear cut winner that comes out of that triple threat,
you're right.
and then like Eddie Kingston and Danielson go to a draw, and they make it a triple threat of Danielson, Eddie Kingston, and Moxley, or you know, whatever it ends up being. Like,
we haven't seen a draw yet. What a time to pull it out of your story bag right there
in your final match, in your semifinal match. It's a possibility to consider. I never thought of it until just now, but
I kind of dig that, actually, because as you mentioned before, I guess you could heat up the leftovers of the Keith Lee versus Swerve Strickland feud for the pay-per-view, as they definitely alluded to it. But is that enough to keep the momentum? I think a lot of the flack that AEW Creative has gotten is you drop the ball on some guys with momentum, mostly Ricky Starks, Wardlow, guys that are hotter than hot, ready for a world title push, and they go on the back burner and they disappear. The worst thing you can do is put ice on Swerve Strickland. He is red hot. Keep throwing gasoline on the fire. And
that's very
true. I would like to see him in a match against Bryan Danielson in the finals. Clear cut right there. But you're right. For a guy like John Moxley, even Jay White, where do they go? Like, do you just put them in a match just for grudge against each other?
And that Keith Lee,
it's complicated.
That Keith Lee challenge would be a nice little fallback to kind of wrap that story up heading into 2024, get it out of the way in that story. And then you have Mox go in, and then Eddie Kingston takes Danielson to the limit. We get a draw, so he actually gets to go to World's End to defend his titles, and you have Danielson, Kingston, and Moxley in a triple threat. I wouldn't be mad at that.
The only odd man out there is Jay White, but I'm sure you could find something for him to do with the Bull Club, and just maybe put him with the Guns or something in a nice multi-man match that could be exciting. The party match on every card. We're always looking for a party match. We know they love them on the pay-per-view. So
I mean, if you wanted to get wild with it and just ride off this devil shit, the devil did jump Jay White. If him and the Guns took on 3 of the henchmen, the masked henchmen, and the masked henchmen were all unveiled, but the devil wasn't. I mean, there's a lot of ways you could go, you know.
The draw thing looms large. I mean, we may see one, man, like you would imagine you see one draw, right? They really emphasize that you could go to a draw, and it has not happened yet.
Right.
Like, what a time to turn that tarot card over and reveal this is what's happening. That's pretty awesome.
It's a big possibility. Just before we wrap up and move on to our other 2 big stories, any possible matches you see, because like you said, we're recording ahead of time. We don't have the full card ahead of us. The 2 matches that pop in my mind that could possibly be happening at World's End would be FTR against House of Black.
Yep.
And also Julia Hart defending the TBS title against Abaddon.
Yeah, and I feel like those are 2 foregone conclusions. I'd imagine the Trios Championships will be defended in some capacity, and not that the Acclaimed have really had a lot of build. They've been on Collision for a bit, but not exactly sure where they're going with that. Maybe it's defending against Top Flight. Like, I know they defended against them before. But you would imagine the championship we defended, like I said before, about 10 to 11 matches on a card is about right for these AEW pay-per-views. They certainly have a lot more to go as we're sitting here looking at 4 confirmed and 5 rumored. And you mentioned the other 2, puts us at 7. So we still are looking at 4 more matches that need to fill a pre-show and otherwise.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting things that could come into play here. It's going to be interesting to see how, does Orange get an international title match on this card? Like there's several belts that could be represented here. So who knows?
What I really liked was the conversation about the Continental Classic finals, because even if we were recording this on Sunday morning or Monday live, we still wouldn't know what the finals would be, of course, because Wednesday is going to, and they're pushing to limit. Give them a lot of credit. There's a lot of steam going into World's End. That train is going to be right through the station. There's no sort of slowing down. It's right through. But the conversation has me more intrigued about than I was, especially all the different possibilities. And that's amazing as we're sitting here almost like final day of the regular season, all these different playoff potential implications. That's what you want, whether you're the NFL, NBA, MLB, and even the C2. We want implications and stakes. That's what really drives story.
Absolutely, man.
All right, let's get to big story number 2.
Big story 2.
So as we covered here on Wrestling Tonight, all the free agents from the releases, well, that date's finally here. December 21st was circled on the calendar. And earlier last week, we had the free agents being able to hit the open market. So the other story that kind of got folded into this was Scott D'Amore on Busted Open Radio talking about a surprise appearance for the event, talked about a major signing that's being inked up. And Colt and I were talking about this on Brace for Impact on Thursday. Both of those things are not the same. I feel like we're going to get some mystery faces that are not going to be mainstays in the TNA roster in the locker room. But I think they're also going to make a big signing. I was predicting Nick Nemeth, but there's a lot of different layers to this. Of course, the 3 top names to me, of course, even when we were talking about it back then, Matt Riddle, Mustafa Ali, Nick Nemeth are the 3 top tier names here. And 2 of the 3 have really found kind of what their path of the calendar year is going to be. Matt Riddle signing with MLW. They announced that he's going to be taking on Jacob Fatu at MLW Kings of the Coliseum live on Triller TV Saturday, January 6th at the ECW Arena. And then we also had Mustafa Ali waited till like 12:01 a.m. being like 17 matches that he's going to be running through for 2024. And
World tour, man, all over the globe.
Taking on Speedball Mike Bailey. There's a lot of other dream matches happening. So good for Mustafa Ali, who has a lot of pent-up energy and ready and willing to prove his name that he's more than just what WWE was presenting on their screen as.
Yeah, those 2 guys, I'm shocked that Riddle went to MLW. Now, I know MLW kind of built it that he's back. I'm wondering, is he exclusive to MLW, or is this just they brought him in to take on Jacob Fatu at Kings of the Coliseum?
Yeah.
That's yet to be determined. We haven't got details if this is like an actual long-term exclusive contract. Now, I know he has history with MLW, but that was kind of shocking. It's a hell of a match, man. Jacob Fatu, one of the best talents outside of the major promotions in America. And Mustafa Ali, he could easily show up. I mean, just because he's on this world tour doesn't mean he couldn't pop in. It looks like he's being a bit of a free agent, bouncing independent to independent, but I don't think he's going to be popping up in TNA. I kind of like what you and Colton were talking about on Brace for Impact, that you think there's going to be possibly a big person arriving, whether it's, this Endeavor streaming situation that's made them friendlier with Paul Levesque and the WWE brass. And maybe you get an AJ Styles popping in. I know you floated the idea of maybe CM Punk popping in just to kind of tip of the cap to TNA relaunching. I think AJ Styles makes the most sense in that situation to do that, especially if he was somehow tied into rechristening the world title as the TNA world title. It adds a lot of history there. So I'm thinking maybe something like that. You could even have like you guys were talking, a Samoa Joe come out to rechristen that title. You could bring in a Kurt Angle from the outside to kind of rechristen that title. But I do think we're going to see, if I were to guess, I think when they did the Slammiversary pay-per-view, I believe in 2020, that's after the big wave of layoffs, pandemic layoffs at WWE happened. And they debuted a shit ton of people at Impact Slammiversary. I mean, it was Heath, Brian Myers. I think there was like 4 or 5 people that popped up in that slew. I think we're going to see something similar here. I think Scott D'Amore wants to really hit the ground running with this TNA rebrand. And I think we could see a big figure like an AJ Styles, kind of an ambassador situation, come in, give some weight. I think we're going to see a big signing, whether that's Nick Nemeth or someone like that. And I wouldn't be shocked if we get kind of a lower mid-card guy come out in some form or fashion, like a Riddick Moss or a Boogs or an Elias. Like one of those I think could pop up too. So I think we're going to see probably bare minimum 2 surprises, but I wouldn't be shocked if we got 3 or 4 surprises on this Hard to Kill event.
So we mentioned Mustafa Ali is out there, but other names that have become freed from their shackles of WWE. We have Aaliyah, Shelton Benjamin. You mentioned Rick Boogs, Dana Brooke, Daba Kato, Elias. You mentioned Quincy Elliott, Ulysses Leon, Mace Mansour, Riddick Moss, Matt Riddle. We have Shanky as well, Top Dollar, Nick Nemeth, and of course Emma. But some of the other names, like Mansour is making his debut in GCW. So we've seen some of these names announced. I think they announced Mansour well before the 21st. So that's interesting. Maybe he flew under the radar. But I think you're pretty much dead on. I think Nick Nemeth, we saw him at Wrestle Dream in the back. Pictures cropped up in the locker room with some of the talent. Of course, he's friends, so it doesn't really matter as far as
his brother works at AEW.
Exactly. And so it doesn't matter as far as who he's hanging out with and spending time with. I think he's better suited for me, Nick Nemeth, the most wanted man, as he's calling himself, now across independents and otherwise on the TNA roster. I think he has a lot more to give there. Top guy type of stuff. I think he kind of falls into the fold of AEW in the worst way possible. He slips through the cracks because of the depth, not because of his lack of talent. So I would love to see him go there and have the option to go work New Japan Pro Wrestling and do all the independent dates as we discussed before. But as I think he really made it clear on that graphic, you'll never guess who's showing up. He made it very, very clear that it wasn't signing when you say showing up. So I'd fully expect anyone with credential in the TNA catalog, like a Samoa Joe and AJ Styles, you were saying in the group chat today, a Kurt Angle, those type of guys would hold a lot of weight, and it's a act of good faith. And, Colt and I were diving deep into the tinfoil hat of even comparing it to the origin of the ECW WWF relationship, really spurned out of the
very true
ECW. So who knows if Paul Levesque is pulling from that playbook and getting in the good graces and helping out, throwing the flowers at the feet of TNA in order to burn that bridge with AEW and to cut them off at the knees, because we know how things are as far as the wrestling world goes. So shall be interesting to watch. I fully expect Scott D'Amore and TNA to benefit from the two sides arguing over who wants to be, I guess, in a relationship with them as far as business things go. But I like the progressive side of things. And I know you and I, nothing is proven, but we've referenced the Knockouts Championship showing up at the Rumble, and that's a big step to show. The next step would be WWE talent showing up on TNA screen or otherwise on the other side of things. So I think that's more likely in 2024 than really in any other year we've been talking about pro wrestling. So we're moving in the right direction.
I mean, I loved that conversation you and Colton had on Brace for Impact, because it was a very astute observation that my mind didn't go instantly to. But this is 100% an opportunity for Paul Levesque to pull a play out of his father-in-law's playbook, where he kind of heats up one of his competitors to become one of his other competitors' main competitor.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, if he put the steam behind TNA, now AEW has to vie against someone else, and it puts a little bit of a buffer between AEW and WWE. Not to say AEW is anywhere close to taking over WWE. We've talked about that's a ridiculous concept to even consider. WWE's in a league of its own. But if you kind of shift the power of the battle between number 2 and number 3 and really separate number 1 from the pack, that's a move they did with ECW, where ECW kind of became that person that with that nagging little just scrappy do barking at WCW and making life difficult for them. There were fans that during those days, I was a teenager, man. There were fans that were like, you know what? Screw WCW. I'm an ECW guy. I stay up late. I watch it on basic cable. So it's do not sell that short. And they have that Endeavor. Endeavor is their parent company. TKO is a subsidiary of Endeavor, and now TNA is kind of flirting in the business with Endeavor and that streaming platform they're launching right around the time of Hard to Kill's buildup. So maybe this is Endeavor kind of getting in Paul Levesque's ear and being like, hey, we're wanting to get a little bit more heat on there. Why don't you throw him a bone and send AJ Styles over there? Why don't you throw him a bone and send Phil Brooks over there? Phil Brooks, CM Punk, that's almost a bridge too far for me. I don't know if they would go that route. It doesn't make sense for TNA, but AJ Styles, dude, that he has tenure, history. In my opinion, the first person I think of when I think of TNA wrestling is AJ Styles. He was the guy, the homegrown guy, the flagship bearer of that company. So I could totally see that happening.
Just to clarify about the Punk thing, it's not really his legacy there, because of course he was there, but that's so not even involved in his catalog.
Blink
to me, it was the initial Bound for Glory conversation in Chicago when he was still vying for services, and there was the conversation that potentially he'd go there. He talked about how solid the locker room was and how great the talent was there, and
it's a big F you to Tony.
Exactly, took the words right out of my mouth. Spite is a hell of a drug, and I think for him, maybe it was part of the conversation. Like, listen, I'll come back to WWE, worked it out with Paul Levesque, but I still have this obligation I want to make right as they launch TNA. You hit Cult of Personality in Vegas. He comes out, the clip goes viral. People see TNA's back. What the hell is this? And hope it's that gateway drug to keep him there. And maybe that's the act of good faith that brings Scott D'Amore, Paul Levesque together, TNA and WWE, Endeavor, and it's this nice convoluted mix that somehow Phil Brooks found himself in the middle of, and good for him. I mean, he opened the door again for WBD and WWE, but he's also opened the door to build a bridge between two companies that, could work together to go against Tony Khan. And like I said before, comparing to the ECW thing, don't think that Vince McMahon liked Paul Heyman, but he also, he disliked Eric Bischoff and Ted Turner that much more.
Yeah, same. And man, CM Punk's really becoming a thorn in the side if this WBD rumor and if this TNA thing would come to fruition. He's causing a lot of headaches for Tony Khan, and he still has that NDA. He doesn't even have to talk to be a thorn in his side.
I really like that all these dates are happening. I mean, we mentioned Mustafa Ali, but Mansoor's out there. We're going to start seeing these other guys pop up in other independents. So this is really cool to see. A lot of talent on this crop of wrestlers that got released. I know we're talking about the main ones, but even the underbelly of it is riddled with talent. And I'm looking forward to seeing where they wind up, because if it's not TNA, It could be the DPWs of the world. It could be Rev Pro, GCW, even, Remarkable Wrestling. They have the ability to work elsewhere. And the wrestling world's better when you kind of infiltrate into the independents and put this influx of talent that has WWE experience and, works on both sides. They can bring their star power to the show, but they can also kind of show the world what they can do, not under the guise of the machines on top of me. And, Mustafa Ali's the perfect example of it. Like, this dude is immensely talented. I think he could have been a world champion, probably would have been a world champion if he didn't get hurt prior to Kofi Mania taking over. That's a conversation that will always linger over him. But I think with a guy like him, he has to buck the trend similar to Brian Myers and Matt Cardona and all the guys that have that WWE stink odor on them, as far as like, you have a glass ceiling, and it's going to be probably a couple weeks. We're going to see Mustafa Ali break through that ceiling to be the hottest commodity in all pro wrestling. Just wait.
So since we're on this free agent, before we move on, who do you think is lined up for TNA day out of all of these free agents? Who is the most likely to go to TNA, as far as, give me maybe 2 or 3 that you think are possibilities, and AEW as well?
So I mentioned Nick Nemeth. I think he winds up in TNA at this point, looking at the way the scope is working. I think Rick Boogs winds up in TNA. I think he's a perfect middle of the ground guy in there. And I also like Elias. I think Elias fits in well there. I think people forget how over and popular Elias was for that short period of time with the Walk with Elias stuff, his feud with John Cena. Long time ago at this point, but the guy showed he can get popular on a big stage. And I think that TNA creative outlet could definitely deem a lot of really great results if they allow him the creativity, and they will. So I think he's going to wind up there as well.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think Elias and Boogs are 100% TNA bound. Nick Nemeth is definitely in the mix. I think the only 2 people that AEW's looking at is Nick Nemeth and Mustafa Ali. I think those are the 2 big ones. I think Mustafa, man, I think he's AEW bound. I just think he is in that world.
And I think it's probably going to take this run through the indies where people, maybe Tony likes him. Of course, Tony So has his finger on the pulse of pro wrestling, but his stock's going to go up in the beginning of the year. And I guarantee, similar to Speedball in the beginning of 2023, everyone's going to be like, where did he come from? And he's going to put on these banger matches in GCW. And like I said, he signed on to, no joke, probably 17 matches to start the year. So he's running straight in. And like I said, it's a matter of time before he signed to a bigger company, whether it be TNA or AEW, but maybe he doesn't even want that. Maybe he wants to just kind of hone his craft and be the guy for a little bit and show people what he can do.
Riddick Moss is another one that's highly underrated, man. That kid is got size, talent, and he's more of a hunk of clay that you can mold. He's not coming with this gimmick that's going to be attached to him. I think he could come into either one of those companies and kind of reinvent himself very easily. The person that I think could end up in TNA, but it seems like he's off the table, and I'm not buying. I don't care that they made the announcement. I still think Matt Riddle is a possibility for TNA. There has been unless I missed it, I did not see some exclusive contract announcement. I saw the King of Bros is back in MLW. It's this one-off thing. I could easily see that deal being made for Kings of Coliseum. And it's a bit of a swerve because right after that, he could land in TNA if it's not an exclusive deal.
You think they spend all that lawsuit settlement money on Matt Riddle?
That's true too. That's true too. They could have done that.
I know what you're saying here, because MLW, the contract stuff is always convoluted. We don't know exactly who's exclusive to them. There's certainly there are guys that are signed and locked up long-term, but they also bring in one-offs. Like we've seen guys that they're not there for an extended period of time. I can't imagine Matt Riddle was going to sell himself and be like, okay, I'm going to be with MLW for 4 years. I can't imagine seeing that, especially with what he can do similar to Mustafa Ali. Like, wouldn't you want to be the King of Bros on the independents for a bit longer? Like, do the match, of course, in January 6th, but it's a lot more to give. And I think raising your stock, all it's going to take is a little bit for people to remember what Matt Riddle is, because all it takes is a few matches and things going viral to show, because the dude is so immensely talented in the ring, to just get rid of the negative stuff. The news cycle moves so fast that once he has a few good matches in him, everyone's gonna be like, Matt Riddle needs to be in this promotion. He needs to go to AEW. He needs to go to TNA. Let's get it going. So
this is a you scratch my back, I scratch yours situation. I think Matt Riddle wanted, just like Mustafa Ali had that video primed up for 1201. I think Matt Riddle had a match booked that he wanted to get back out in the consciousness of the independent fans. And he has a history with Court Bauer and MLW. So it was an easy way. I'm with you. There's not a shot in hell. This guy comes out of RK Bro. He was super over in the biggest wrestling company in the world. And the first thing he does is sign a 3 to 5 year deal with MLW. That is not what happened. He is a free agent. Another guy that I think we're not talking about because he wasn't included in the WWE releases that just got their freedom after those 90-day clauses. But I think this guy is someone who could 100% show up at Hard to Kill, and no one's talking about is Alex Hammerstone.
Yeah.
I think Alex Hammerstone he's a top guy in TNA, man. He was the world champion at MLW for years. He was one of their top guys. He has that Triple H flavor to him. I mean, the guy had to cut his hair because he looked so much like 2000s era Triple H. He's somebody to look out for. I think he would be a big, big get. I don't think it's who Scott D'Amore is talking about, but he could be a surprise at Hard to Kill.
Yeah, I would love to see him. I think Nick Nemeth is the signing, to go back to the original conversation for TNA. He's the signing. And I think, as we were talking about before, an AJ Styles, a Kurt Angle, Samoa Joe is probably going to be one of those guys. I don't know. I just feel like Hard to Kill feels like this big party for pro wrestling, not just TNA, where everyone's bringing gifts, and WWE might be bringing the gift of, here's your history, dude. Let these guys kind of bring you guys in, cut the ribbon, and get us off to the right start with these guys in the ring. What speaks volumes about TNA being back than AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, guys like Kurt Angle? And who's to say on the other side of things? Like, can you imagine TNA is the bridge to get AEW and WWE in the same room, where you have AJ Styles and you have Samoa Joe, maybe a Chris Daniels come over? Like, those guys, they live large in that catalog.
That's what I was going to mention. I'm glad you said that, because we, in our head, we're going down the rabbit hole of Triple H taking a page out of Vince McMahon's book and turning TNA against AEW. I honestly don't think, maybe WWE would want to do that, but I don't think Scott D'Amore, I don't think that's his type of business, man. I think he's smarter than being roped into being the Fed's lapdog. I think they have gotten along with every promotion. And to me, the dream scenario is for TNA to relaunch this brand and make a statement and live in a world where we could see that new TNA rechristened world title being brought out by AJ Styles from WWE, by Samoa Joe from AEW. Hell, bring Kurt Angle in. Hell, bring Jeff Jarrett back. Like, I would love to see kind of that Mount Rushmore of guys taking back the history of TNA and sending them off into a new year, a new brand. That seems more on brand with how Scott D'Amore does business. I don't think he wants to make an enemy out of Tony like Triple H would want to do. I don't know if that's TNA's mindset.
Yeah, and let's forget that we also have an inroad, not just the Knockouts Championship that we've beaten to the ground at the Royal Rumble, but there was also the instance of The Rock speaking on Ken Shamrock's behalf at the Impact Hall of Fame. So
yeah,
that was kind of a relationship that they were able to figure out and get it done. So I know it's a video, it's not in person, but who's to say you don't make a call and you, like you said, a quid pro quo situation where you scratch someone's back and figure it out. So I would love to see it, just for the sake of pro wrestling, to be able to own your history. Because so many times where companies are at each other's throats, we don't get to see the history get honored because, egos are in the way and people are insecure and they don't want each other to succeed because it thinks, the misconception that other people's success is going to interfere with yours. We're sitting at a dinner table where everybody can eat. There's enough food to go around. Let's keep that understanding for pro wrestling.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of TNA. We've seen them work with multiple companies across all platforms for a long time. And I hope that continues with them.
So let's get to big story number 3. You mentioned WBD. Well, they're in big story number 3.
Big Story 3.
So this is an emerging story that we're definitely going to get more details on as the weeks go on, maybe in the next coming days. But WBD, Warner Brothers Discovery, are in talks to merge with Paramount Global. So the future of wrestling at Warner Brothers Discovery was already uncertain, with the media company said to be in negotiation with both AEW and WWE regarding the promotion's respective TV rights. Of course, we know that WBD and AEW have been synonymous since the jump and launch off point of the promotion. Now this is being thrown for a loop thanks to what is being called a potential merger that could really just shake up the entire entertainment industry. And as we know, as mergers happen and conversations happen, we've dealt with this with the TKO stuff, that positions are eliminated. Sometimes intellectual property is eliminated. Maybe endeavors are changed and initiatives are altered. We don't have the same conversations. Maybe wrestling's not at the forefront. If Paramount now is merging over, you have someone in a different seat that views wrestling in a different light. A lot of different variables here, but we have Axios reporting that WBD is in talks to merge with Paramount Global. The CEO, David Zaslav, met with Paramount CEO Bob Backish earlier this week to negotiate the merger, which the meeting took over several hours. They said it was a great meeting as Zaslav and Backish discussed many of the facets of a potential merger, including merging their respective streaming services. And they even, quote, hired bankers to explore the deal. So this feels like it's more than just kicking the tires on a new car. It seems like they're drawing up the paperwork. And should a merger between both companies be complete, it would create one of the largest media conglomerates in America, which is only comparable to Disney. So obviously the conversation, we're sitting here on a wrestling podcast with mics in front of our face talking about what it means for wrestling. I alluded to it before, like when it determines on who's sitting in the seat. Right now, WBD views wrestling as, to me, successful. It's valuable to them. And I think we can all see live programming as far as preventing cord cutting is always at the front of everybody's mind for these TV executives. But who's to say with the merge and a position is moved, and who's to say what Bob Backish of Paramount views as important? Is it going to align with Zaslav, and what's the compromise to this? So this could throw things into a weird spin where maybe WWE doesn't wind up on WBD, but maybe AEW doesn't stay there because of now this merger moves them in a direction where, hey, it's not that important to us.
Yeah, this is major news, man. I mean, this is news that transcends the pro wrestling world. It just so happens that this news affects the pro wrestling world because like you so eloquently put about, Raw, Warner Brothers kind of talking, and then AEW obviously is talking. I know Dave Meltzer talked about AEW has been having conversations not only about, the rights to Dynamite and Collision and Rampage, but they're also having conversations with WBD about getting on that streaming platform. Well, this merger is going to directly affect that streaming platform. Max could become one of the biggest streaming platforms this side of Netflix. It could overtake Netflix. That's how big this deal is. So if you guys know, me and Hawk do Broken VCR, we're big movie nerds. This is a monumental business move, the likes of which we haven't seen in a very, very long time, on the level of Warner Brothers and Paramount are two studios that are a part of what is known as the Big Five, the original 5 Hollywood studios that was created. All these movies that we love, these have been around since the dawn of Hollywood. Paramount and Warner Brothers coming together is massive, massive news. There's a podcast that I listen to weekly, well, several times a week. It runs about 30 minutes. It's on The Ringer. For anyone who likes getting in the weeds of Hollywood business, I highly recommend it. It's called The Town with Matthew Baloney. They covered this today about all the implications, and Warner Brothers and Paramount merging. I mean, it's major news. So when the big five were RKO Pictures, MGM, 20th Century Fox, Warner Brothers, and Paramount. To have these two monolith companies coming together, doing business, really becoming a Disney type level powerhouse. How does that shake out with WWE, with AEW? I mean, if this business transaction would go down and they would merge together, now this is all reports. We don't know how legit, how far along this is, but if this,
hiring bankers is pretty far along. I mean, that's the rumor and innuendo, but that's pretty serious.
I mean, that's as legit as it gets.
They're driving to the chapel to get married. Like they have the dress on.
Exactly. So in that regard, if AEW does end up kind of inking that deal with WBD, and all of the talks with Raw is just kind of a formality, a business type of tactic, that's huge for AEW. If AEW comes under the banner of a Paramount Warner Brothers kind of conglomerate, that's bigger than Endeavor. You know what I mean? Like that is a monster company to have behind you, even bigger than Turner or WBD. This will be big. If you go down, just look at the films. Look at the films made by Warner Brothers over the last 100 years. Look at the films made by Paramount Pictures. This could be massive for whoever gets in bed with them. Now if WWE sells the rights to Raw to this company, I mean, we're talking about a monopoly. We're talking about a company that not only is in bed with TKO, but also in bed with this level. I mean, this would be the equivalent of them doing a deal with Disney. Disney is as big as it gets. So this is going to be very, very interesting to watch, because whoever gets with this company, again, though, another dark take, if we want to go the dark history route of this, what if mergers happen and sometimes they're like, we don't want to be in the wrestling business.
Right.
That's
what we saw with WCW when AOL purchased them. They didn't want to be in the business. That's why things went the way they did so quickly.
Right. So that's a possibility too. Like if these two companies come together, it's like, we have so much IP and intellectual property to put on this. We don't need a wrestling company. We don't need the headaches that come with that. We don't want to go against WWE. We don't need to be in the business of pro wrestling. That's a very, very likely decision too. So keep your eyes on this merger, because the fallout of this could be a complete net positive for whatever wrestling company is under them. Or it could be, hey, these guys are off the table for potential suitors and they get out of the pro wrestling game.
So the other thing to consider is, if they're in the talks of this merge, are they hesitant to even sign a new deal? The obvious conversation is that maybe they want to clear the books. They don't want to take on any new 100%. Obligations. So maybe WBD falls out of the running for both of these guys. But the other thing is, I think we want to make sure we're not selling wrestling short about how valuable it is. We continue to trumpet how valuable live,
so valuable
52-week a year programming continues to be as we watch. So there's not a lot of things that can rival it, if anything, as far as live program goes, because sports are seasonal. Wrestling is every week and on a consistent basis. So I think wrestling is still attractive to them, but as it explains a lot that now WBD is having conversations with WWE. We're wondering, like, why would they take that jump? Do they want to take on all that debt? Well, they're combining with Paramount. It doesn't really feel like they're really out of their depth. Like this feels like right in line with it, where having WWE with this merger in mind is like, okay, well, that makes sense because of how big they are. And I like the take, though, the silver lining take on your side to help crop up AEW, and you hope the relationships that have been carved in the past 5 years with Tony Khan and the executives there hold a lot of weight, and they can continue those relationships, whatever merger happens with the Paramount crew. And hopefully whoever sits in the big seat making all those decisions, casting doubt and judgment and putting the stamp on things, really sees wrestling for how valuable it is. Because as you mentioned before, these platforms are needed for wrestling to continue to thrive. And the difference between AEW succeeding and failing is winding up on TNT and TBS, because if they didn't, who's to say? I mean, look at TNA being on Access TV and being on Anthem and on Pop TV. And,
Yeah.
there's a huge divide about distribution. And if you don't have distribution and eyes on it, as we were just discussing before, if you don't have eyes, I mean, it's hard for people to find your product. You're not going to be successful at all.
And think of all the cross promotional stuff that AEW has done with WBD's properties like Game of Thrones and Rick and Morty and things like that. Now it opens it up. The Paramount Network has some of the most successful properties in TV right now. Yellowstone, one of the most popular TV shows out there, is on the Paramount Network. So this would open a lot of doors for more cross promotion, and it could be a very successful thing. And I'm with you, Ace. Like, I don't think they jump out of the wrestling business because it is TV. No matter, these guys are going to have this library of movies. Movies don't draw numbers on cable, and a large sect of this country still has their cords. A lot of the younger generation is cord cutting, but there's a lot of people that still get that basic cable. And I think live sports, live pro wrestling, week in, week out, it's one of the driving things. If you look at the numbers, at the ratings week to week, it's always sports, wrestling, and news. That's really the three things keeping cable alive. And news is dying. It's really wrestling and sports that have kind of kept cable around.
Yeah, as we continue to discuss this, of course, it's going to be huge news, and the implications loom very, very large. So we're going to be following this story, and as things continue to progress as far as WBD and Paramount goes, that's the same conversation we have. And hopefully on their end, they see the value of AEW, because I think in a world where we have AEW as a competitor, it makes WWE better for all these people that are looking at through the lens of, I hope AEW goes away. Those people are misguided. They're delusional. If they don't believe that competition puts WWE in a position where they're seeing storytelling that they like. If you go back to, before AEW existed, 2019, 2018, the WWE product was unwatchable. So for those that hate watch AEW and those that are in the comments talking about how much Tony Khan is a bad creative booker and he doesn't know wrestling, well, at the very least, be thankful for that. He put competition and continues to invest in pro wrestling, because that created a market where everybody is successful. And we're watching these, wrestling thrive all over the place. It's spawning success everywhere. Independents, otherwise, smaller promotions, everyone is thriving.
Yeah. You don't want competition to go away for WWE. There's a reason why WWE is hot right now, and it's because their feet were held to the fire.
And why is everybody so stuck, dude, on the bottom line? I keep seeing this thing where he's using his dad's money, or
who cares?
They're losing money. They're putting a lot of money in. You're not seeing the bottom line. They're not a private company. You don't see the profits. Why do you care what the company is making? I don't understand why that mindset for fans resonates, where the company making the most money makes them the most watchable, entertaining product. I just don't understand that concept. These fans that invest in WWE because they're making more money, I don't understand that.
No, it's a bad kind of outdated take. It's a bunch of Cheeto fingered idiots like chiming in, because first and foremost, when you start a new business, and this is just like a mom and pop shop, a rule of thumb is you're not going to be in the black until about 3 to 5 years into your business. You have to sink so much money to launch a business on a small level before you see a return. So the fact that they're like, well, AEW is not making money, the business that AEW is in is all about this TV deal. That's where the money is made. Thank God we have a guy with daddy's money, if that's what you want to say. Thank God we have a guy like that, so we can pay these wrestlers and he can withstand those in the red days, those in the red years, where eventually AEW will come out of this and start earning money. But it takes time, man. I would love to open the books of WWE's history and see if they were making hand over fist money in those early days. I bet they weren't.
Well, the newsletter, I know they were still a company that wasn't revealing everything they had in their books, but they were hurting financially, cutting house shows, cutting live events, and things happen in cycles. And I think each company, Now, if we go with the same notion that people look at Tony, where he's the benefit of having his father backing him financially, if you believe a wrestling promotion be started without a financial backer, whether it be Smoky Mountain Wrestling or ECW, there's always a money guy. His money guy happens to be his father. So, like, I don't understand this mindset of, what do you want to do? Use all of his own money? We're lucky that they're investing in this. Like, they think it's not some pet project. They're in bed with Warner Bros. Discovery. They're selling out Wembley Stadium. This isn't a science fair project for his son. Like, I don't understand this fucking mindset.
It's an awful mindset. I remember stories of Vince McMahon having to remove the fucking water coolers from the corporate offices to save money. He wasn't even bringing in water. They were taking, how you have to rent those water coolers for your office. He didn't want to pay the rent for the water cooler. That's how bad of a spot they were in at one point in time. It's ebbs and flows. It's peaks and valleys. This is pro wrestling. There's going to be dark days. There's going to be those salad days. And I think we're in the salad days for AEW, but the stakes are on the way, baby.
Yeah, I mean, for those that are getting behind this WWE company, and it's fine to like the product. It's been great. And for a lot of people, it's been promotion of the year. But for everybody to sit there and say they're better because they make more money and more people watch it, like this pack mentality of, I'm only going to like it if everybody likes it too. Like, that speaks volumes on you.
It's weak. It's just weak. Like, it's hive mind shit, man.
Well, no one's watching it, so that it can't be good. Like, okay, so some of the best independent films ever made initially didn't do record box office hits. It took time to grow, and you're going to look back at the catalog of AEW, in my opinion, I don't care how many people watch it. I enjoy it. So
absolutely. Grindhouse with Death Proof and Planet Terror was an absolute flop for Tarantino. But I pop that movie in my Blu-ray pretty regularly, and I never put an Avengers movie in my Blu-ray player. So that
how
goes
many
to
times
show
you watched the
something.
Marvels that just came out? They did pretty good box office wise.
Right.
All right, let's get to the quick hitters. Quick hitters. All right, very quickly with the Continental Classic update. Of course, we gave you guys sort of the lay of the land, but I'll give you guys the points, of course. The Blue League, we have Andrade El Idolo, 3-1 with 9 points. Brian Danielson's at 3-1 with 9 points himself. We also have Brody King at 6, Eddie Kingston at 6, Claudio at 6, and Daniel Garcia pulling up the rear 0-4 with 0 points. In the Gold League, John Moxley with a staggering 12 points, 4-0. We got Swerve right there, 4-1-0 at 12 points. Jay White's 3-1 with 9 points. Roosh 2-3 with 6. Mark Briscoe and Jay Lethal, between the two of them, I got 3 points. Mark Briscoe's 1-4 and Jay Lethal's 0-5. So here we are with the Continental Classic as we're looking forward to World's End, where we crown the first ever Triple Crown in AEW history with New Japan Pro Wrestling and Ring of Honor in mind. Coming up to a finish here, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's been a good tournament. I was just real quick. I was happy to see Mark Briscoe get at least a win in here.
For sure.
And I like that Mark came out and said that he's looking at this run as his singles rookie run. This is his rookie year, he said, of being a singles competitor. So it's a cool kind of outlook from Mark.
I agree with that. And as we move towards other quick hitters, we have Charlotte Flair signing a new contract. Of course, last week we were talking about the injury she sustained being out for 9 months, but in a Fightful Select report earlier this week, Dave Meltzer confirmed that Charlotte had agreed to a contract extension with WWE, noting that she had signed the contract several months ago. So there's also been a whole bunch of re-signings. We're talking about Bayley's re-signing. We'll talk about that according to Fightful. And we also have Dominic and Rey Mysterio re-signing for the company. They've been the first extension since the TKO merger. And they also said it was, quote, a huge money increase and one of the highest paid deals in women's history regarding to Charlotte Flair. So she'll be out a long period of time, but, securing that bag to get healthy, and she'll be back and she'll be living comfortably until then. But well-deserved, man. Her legacy is very cemented, and I can't wait to see what else she has to do in WWE once she comes back healthy.
Yeah, I'm glad she got the bag before that injury, because who knows what would have happened if that injury happened. That's a pretty severe injury she suffered, and, she's an elder statesman in that division. So I really want her to come back, but injuries like that so late into your career, not that she's like, we're putting her out to pasture, but in the women's division, she's one of the elder statesmen, and I hope she comes back. I hope it doesn't slow her down, man.
So on the AEW side of things, CJ Perry appears to be in good spirits after having surgery recently to treat what was called a serious infection. So she was in the hospital since Saturday after a cut on her finger became infected, spread up her arm. So she was posting this on Instagram and also on other social media, revealing that the infection started from a tiny splinter she got backstage at Dynamite last week. She posted a picture that was pretty graphic on Instagram stories that, showing how severe the infection got. And the infection really caused her to miss making her CMLL debut on Friday, and she's supposed to be managing Andrade El Idolo in his first match back to the promotion. And unfortunately for her, she didn't miss time. But most importantly, she's okay, because they even call this sort of life-threatening, which how quickly it turned in a bad direction.
What a freak accident. A splinter. I mean, if you saw the image on social media, they pretty much had to fillet her finger open. It was pretty brutal and life-threatening from a splinter in your finger. Guys, clean your wounds, even if it's a little tiny splinter. Infections do not mess around. I've had a lot of friends in the past who kind of mess around with mixed martial arts and grappling, and it's notorious for staph infections, MRSA, things like that. You can't play with that stuff. If you see something, get it checked out, get it looked at, because once it grows, it becomes a very, very serious situation.
So we talked about this on Thursday on Brace for Impact, but TNA is definitely securing their roster both in-house and also with the free agents. But we saw on Thursday, Danny Luna had signed a TNA wrestling contract. We had the Rascals re-sign with TNA Wrestling, and they also have their new ring announcer being announced with Jade Chung. So all the pieces are falling in place for TNA. A lot of great things happening over there. I like that they're securing their roster they have in-house to keep the same energy, same momentum of Impact Wrestling. They're not changing what's been working right now. They're just changing the 3 letters, and I really like that.
Yeah, I saw, Brian Myers, the Rascals, they're all getting these re-signings. I'm wondering if they're really are the contracts coming up and they're getting real contracts, or are they just shifting the contracts from Impact to TNA with the brand split? I'm wondering how that's shaking out.
Maybe it's just a change of letterhead. I'm not sure exactly who was up as far as deals go, but I like that they're securing all their guys. So the in-house, you're going to have, you're going to have Zachary Wentz, you're going to have Trey Miguel, you're still going to have your Brian Myers, and even PCO was the original. So, but we also get some new faces like Leon Slater signed, who's the first one there. And, Danny Luna, 24 years old, the future of the Knockouts division, one of the best wrestlers on the UK independent scene.
Yeah, it's exciting time. I'm more excited about TNA going into 2024 than almost any promotion. It's wild.
So we also have, as mentioned before during that Charlotte story, Dominic Mysterio recently signed a new contract that will keep him, quote, with WWE for years. So PW Insider reported on Monday that he signed apparently a 5-year deal, while another source confirmed the deal but did not know the length of it. So we're not exactly sure. We do know that he's going to be there for quite some time, and rightfully so, man. Dominic had a great year in 2023. He's earned his keep. We'll talk about him during the tourneys, about how valuable he is, because goddamn, this dude was the second most active pro wrestler on the WWE roster. Only Cody Rhodes had more matches in 2023, and they put him in a big spot, man. He's going to be facing CM Punk in a pair of matches at MSG in December 26th, the Kia Forum. So day after Christmas, he's going to be in action in New York City, and then he's going to be in Los Angeles December 30th. Dominic CM Punk. So it shows how highly they think of him.
Yeah, that's awesome to see. I think this is the right move for Dom. I think he'll definitely be a topic of discussion in the tourneys next week. So tune in, and good on the kid. I mean, he's a legacy act. Rey Mysterio's son, WWE keeping the Mysterio name in the family. That's awesome.
So we also have Hard to Kill announcing that they're going to have an hour-long pre-show. So they noted they're going to be having 3 matches so far, and they're going to be adding more. Rich Swann versus Steve Macklin, Eric Young and Frank Kazarian versus Brian Myers and Eddie Edwards with Alicia Edwards. And the Digital Media Championship is going to be defended on the pre-show. Tommy Dreamer against Crazy Steve. Just want to put that out there, and the card's starting to come together. This is definitely convoluted because it's hard to build a show when you don't have live programming, but they're doing their best. Of course, we know that Hard to Kill is going to be headlined by Alex Shelley versus Moose. The Knockouts Championship defended Trinity against Jordan Grace. Triple threat for the X Division Championship, Chris Sabin, Kushida, and Vikingo. And then they announced a Knockouts Ultimate X match with participants TBD. So this card's coming together. Looking forward to it. As you mentioned before, it's hard not to be excited for what TNA is doing.
Yeah, I'm so stoked for this company, man. I'm so stoked. I think this is just the this is just the beginning too. I think we're going to see some major like TV deal news when that stuff comes up. I think there's going to be a lot of big things coming for this company.
So we also had this past weekend, The Iron Claw is now in theaters. So reviews are pretty positive from everything I've heard. If you are a diehard wrestling fan that know the Von Erich story, you might walk away a little bit disappointed. But if you go in sort of unaware, the storytelling's great, the acting's fantastic, and the action's on par with anything you want to see in an action movie. So I'm definitely going to check it out, and it might be the first movie to bring me back to theaters in quite some time.
Yeah, I mean, guys, it's not making the money of the Marvels, so I don't know how you judge success. It's not a Marvel movie, but go out, you're wrestling fans. The Iron Claw, Von Erich's one of the great kind of tragic wrestling stories is getting a good director, Sean Durkin, taking this to task. I can't wait to go see it. And a lot of our favorites pop up in this. A lot of our favorites are depicted in this movie. Of course, the Von Erichs, but I'm hearing that Ric Flair pops up, Harley Race pops up, Bruiser Brody pops up. So go take your date, go check out the Iron Claw. I can't wait to see it in theaters.
So we also got an update on the New Japan Pro Wrestling Strong Women's Champion, Julia, and apparently AEW is not considered a series player anymore. So it seems like she was on her way there, and she was expressing interest, but WWE and New Japan Pro Wrestling are the only ones left on the list. So Meltzer wrote this in the newsletter, said nothing new in Julia's past that AEW has made any serious play for her, and she's had no conversations with All Elite Wrestling, and she's not considering them. It's WWE or staying in Japan. Julia is set to defend her title against Megan Bayne at Stardom Dream Queendom on December 29th. So we'll see where Julia winds up, and I think she's tailor-made for WWE and ready and willing to become a major, major star. And this is a miss for AEW if they weren't interested. But it seems like it's vice versa. Maybe she didn't want to go there.
Yeah, if AEW is just not interested, that's a huge miss. So Julie is a star wherever she goes.
So we have an update on MJF's AEW contract. So it was recently reported by House of Wrestling that some people within WWE believe MJF has already signed his new contract that runs through 2027. Obviously, his current deal ends January 1st of this year. We talked about that in the World's End story. However, during a recent interview, MJF denied that he had put pen to paper on a new agreement with Tony Khan and AEW. So he also said he wanted to remain a part of AEW's roster, but he also said it's not completely confirmed. So House of Wrestling since followed up with several individuals at WWE to get the reaction to MJF's latest comments during that interview, with one quote, higher up source reiterating that it was all part of a storyline. Another source repeated that they heard MJF was locked up and had signed a new bumper contract last year before returning as the Devil at All Out 2022. They stopped mentioning this bidding war of 2024 on TV. But yeah, this might just be to throw a little bit of confusion into the booking to make it seem like MJF is leaving to put the excitement when he comes back. But yeah, it seems like he's staying with AEW, and this is the right place for him.
Yeah. I don't think he's going anywhere. I think he did sign that bumper deal before he came back at All Out. So yeah. I'm kind of with the sources at WWE on that.
So we also had WWE signing Bray Wyatt to a Legends deal with all of the money proceeds going to the family. And this was according to Mike Rotundi. He was in a quoting about this. He said, I have to give WWE credit. They've done awesome helping our family out with many different things. They put Wyndham on a Legends contract and all proceeds go to Wyndham and his 4 children. Luckily, we have them. So really awesome to see all the merch, all that great stuff. A big piece of Bray Wyatt's legacy is going to continue to live on in all the merchandise, the action figures, and how toyetic and how appropriate that people can still buy that. And it goes towards a good cause going to his family and hopefully continues to flow on in for the remainder of time.
Yeah, absolutely. Class act move from WWE. I can't put that over enough. Happy to see the kids, the family taken care of.
So we mentioned Mustafa Ali and that World Tour he's on, and he waited until 12:21 Eastern time, not 12:01 I said before, but he announced matches for Prestige, GCW, and many more companies being booked for future events. So 3 Canadian promotions announced Ali for events next month. Ali will wrestle in Toronto for Demand Lucha on January 18th, and Ottawa for C4 on January 19th, and Quebec City for NSPW on January 20th. We mentioned the Progress promotion revealed today that Ali will be wrestling on January 28th from London. We also have Defy announcing that he's going to be on their 7th anniversary show February 9th in Seattle. Prestige said he's going to be wrestling Mike Bailey on February 25th. And Ali was also announced for Trouble Brewing in Chicago on March 1st. And Destiny Wrestling is bringing Ali from March 3rd at the Don Kolov Arena in Mississauga, Ontario. So the dude is packing out his calendar, banger after banger. I'm most excited about this prestige match with Mike Bailey. That's going to certainly bring a lot of eyes to the product.
Yeah, that's huge tour for him.
So we talked about this on Brace for Impact, but TNA signed an action figure deal with Powertown Wrestling. They were supposed to be having a deal with another company. It did not go well, but it seems like these wrestling figures are going to be released in 2024, being shipped out in hand, August 2024. You can start ordering. Seems like they'll be doing in early March. So I'm really excited to see who's in the line. They're going to be announcing all this stuff, and I'm sure it's going to be part of the TNA rebrand to see who's in this first line of figures.
Yeah, a new line of wrestling figures. That's exciting for collectors, and a big shout out to our buddy Hal Haney. I know he's working with Powertown to develop some of the faces for, I think, their Rimco at Jace line. So that's exciting news.
So we also had this WWE debuting this concept last Friday called WWE Speed, and they officially filed a trademark for it. So before SmackDown last week, 2 off-air matches with WWE Speed branding took place. The matches had 5-minute time limits with a point system where wrestlers gain 1 point with a victory, lose 1 point with a loss, and no points are awarded for time limit draws. The 2 matches were Bronson Reed versus Nathan Frazier and Cedric Alexander versus Axiom were the first 2 matches with the WWE Speed brand on it. So it appears that the matches were filmed, but no broadcast details have been announced for it. Maybe this is a new concept for a potential new TV show, digital media series. I don't know exactly what it is. Yeah, maybe they got a little bug in there that they liked what the round robin was doing.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I want to see what this WWE Speed turns into.
We mentioned before Charlotte re-signing, but Bailey is also re-signing with the company and is a multi-year deal. She's, getting the bag and staying there. So they're locking up all their people. They talked about Rey Mysterio, Dominic Mysterio, Charlotte, and she got also a huge money increase as well. So good for Bailey.
Yeah, Bailey's my favorite in WWE when it comes to the women's division. So happy to see her stick with the place that built her.
So we also have Will Ospreay finishing up his time on the independent scene. He's going to be competing for Rev Pro Wrestling one last time before going full-time with AEW. So he's going to be wrestling at High Stakes 2024 on Sunday, February 18th. He's wrestling Michael Oku for the Rev Pro Undisputed British Heavyweight Championship. This will be his last match on the independent scene before going full-time to lessen the bump card. It's a really big deal. So he's, had a really busy 2023, and hopefully he continues to put on banger after banger in 2024, but it seems like it's going to be in the walls of AEW.
Crazy that he's stepping away from Rev Pro. I know that's kind of his home promotion. He really supports them. So I like the emphasis, though, that he's dedicating all of his time to AEW. That's exciting.
So we had Jim Ross on his podcast confirming that Dean Malenko has undergone successful brain surgery. So he talked about Dean Malenko and the symptoms of this Parkinson's disease. And Jim Ross said in the podcast, I saw Dean Malenko had some health issues. I saw him there and he had brain surgery. It stops his shakes from Parkinson's, and it has. He's had the surgery. He's such a sweetheart of a guy. So, he continued to talk about Dean Malenko's role in the back, and we can go on for days talking about his resume, and he's one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. I'm glad to hear that he's in good spirits and also in good health, that the Parkinson's tremors and the things that go with it, with the shakes, are being alleviated by this surgery. And I'm hoping it continues to move in the right direction so he can still function in his role and have a high quality of life.
That's awesome, man. I hope it really helps him out. I mean, if it's taking away the shakes, because it was evident, you could see it in some of the segments you could see him in, or some of the interviews he would give. And my heart just broke for Dean, because I'm with you, Ace. He's one of my all-time favorites. He's probably in my top 10 of all time. I love Dean Malenko. I mean, those 90s matches in ECW and WCW cannot go unnoticed. He's one of the greatest lightweight guys of all time, man of 1,000 holds. So all the best to Dean. I hope he continues to be able to give to the business, and I hope this helps his quality of life for sure.
Absolutely. And put some respect on the Iceman, everybody. He is a tier pillar for all your favorite wrestlers.
PWI Wrestler of the Year.
Yeah.
Dean Malenko was the Wrestler of the Year on the PWI. I think, what was it, 97, maybe 98? Yep.
Unbelievable. That his catalog of matches with guys like Eddie Guerrero and
incredible.
Chris Benoit, Chris Jericho, the guy could have a match unlike any other. And a lot of your favorite wrestlers today draw from his playbook, and I'm glad to see he's coaching in the back of AEW. Our final story here in the quick hitters is a new championship being unveiled in ROH. So company owner Tony Khan introduced the Ring of Honor Women's World Television Championship during Thursday's Ring of Honor TV show segment displaying the new belt. They also posted on social media. We have no announcements being made for the first women's TV champion or where it will be crowned or how the first title holder will be decided. But this women's TV championship will be the 7th title recognized by ROH. Obviously, it joins the World Championship, but also the Pure Championship, the TV Championship, the Tag Team Championship, the 6-man Tag Team Championship, and of course, the Women's World Championship. Is obviously the second-tier title in the ROH women's division. We'll see where they go with it. Another championship, and I'm sure this will be heralded with so much criticism, but if they do it right, TV title makes sense. But again, they need to kind of repivot what ROH means as far as the AEW and the separation. There's a lot of stuff that needs to be sorted out in 2024.
Just keep it separated, man. Once you start bringing those ROH titles onto AEW, it gets real convoluted. If it just lives on the ROH brand, I don't have as much of a problem with it, but you gotta get some separation between these two companies.
So let's get to the week ahead of wrestling and preview what's coming up.
The week ahead.
So if you're watching Raw tonight for the week ahead, this is a Christmas night edition of Raw, expected to be a best of episode, apparently hosted by Jackie Redmond and Peter Rosenberg for what they're calling Raw's absolute best of 2023, giving their families off for live action. So they're going to be back in action next week for 2024.
Yeah, I'm happy to see them giving the WWE roster the holiday off. Good on you, Trips.
So on Raw Day 1, January 1st, 2024, back in action, we have the World Heavyweight Championship being defended, Seth Rollins against Drew McIntyre, the Women's World Championship, Rhea Ripley against Ivy Nile, Becky Lynch versus Nia Jax, the Women's Tag Team Championship, #1 contender match, Natalya and Tegan Nox versus Shayna Baszler and Zoe Stark. So outside of that first, Seth Rollins and Drew McIntyre, got to give me a little more on your first episode of the year.
Yeah, especially if you're branding it as day one. I love that they're taking a page out of Tony Khan's book and giving us these kind of special moniker Raws now. So many WWE fans shit on Tony for all of these Winter is Coming, Beach Blast. Now we see them Raw doing the day one moniker. I'm all about this Seth Rollins Drew McIntyre match. I think Drew has a possibility of beating him here. There's some stakes here. There's some intrigue, but everything else leaves a little bit to be desired.
Over on NXT on Tuesday, we have the NXT Underground match, Eddie Thorpe versus Dijak. We have an NXT Heritage Cup match, Noam Dar defending against Josh Briggs, Cora Jade versus Carmen Petrovic, and we get 2 men's breakout tournament semifinals, Oba Femi versus Tavian Heights, and a men's breakout tournament semifinals, Riley Osborne versus Lexis King. The most NXT names of all time, Tavian Heights and Lexis King. Obviously, we know Lexis King and Riley Osborne, Oba Femi. Like they throw this name into a generator. It has to be.
I hate their wrestler names. They're so bad. But yeah, NXT is crushing it. I love Shawn Michaels' booking, but man, these names are terrible.
AEW Dynamite New Year's Smash, the Continental Classic Gold League Finals, Jon Moxley versus Jay White versus Swerve Strickland. And we're also get the Continental Classic Blue League Finals, both guys to be determined. And we're also going to be having MJF and Samoa Joe defending the ROH Tag Team Championship against the Devils. We don't know exactly who they are either. So
yeah, that's interesting. I think there's a possibility those ROH titles could come off of them. I think there's a high possibility.
So next week, we also have NXT New Year's Evil 1/2/24. Lyra Valkyria is going to be defending the NXT Women's Championship against Blair Davenport. Dragunov will defend the NXT Championship against Trick Williams. So those 2 matches announced. I'm sure we're going to get more announced on Tuesday, but just want to put that in everyone's ether because we're not going to be talking about much except for the tourneys next week, not previewing new cards. We're going to put all our focus on the best of 2023.
Dragunov Trick Williams, man, that's a marquee match.
So that's all we got here. Of course, you guys are going to be tuning in for Collision and Smack and all that stuff. We do not have the cards in front of us, but they're happening. Make sure you guys check them out. Support pro wrestling. As we mentioned before, next week's episode is going to be dedicated to 2023, all our superlatives, all the tourneys, the first annual. Please tune in please, let us know what you think of them.
Yeah, man. The tourneys, our year-end award show for 2023. We were here every step of the way on Wrestling Tonight, giving you all the big stories. And now we're going to hand out our awards next week. So be sure to tune in, guys. And again, go to theturnbuckletavern.com. The website's getting a bit of a facelift, so you'll see something new there. And again, remember, we're launching on Patreon Jan 1. So come over. 12 quarters, dog. It's all we're asking.
Got some quarters right here, so I think I can muster up the strength for $2.99.
Oh yeah, 12 quarters gets you in, and we'll have a ton of fun. We're going to have an exclusive Facebook group, a lot of interaction in there, live pay-per-view watch-alongs, a lot of stuff, a lot of fun stuff coming. So keep abreast on that. You can find everything on our Instagram over at Turnbuckle Tavern, and obviously Apple, Spotify, YouTube, man. All the content is there, and it's going to direct you to all the stuff we deliver for you guys. So until next Monday, when we deliver our year-end Tourneys Awards, remember, when we wine and dine with you kings and queens, stay out of the alley and away from the pork and beans. God luck and good speed.
Merry
Reach
Christmas.
for the sky, boy.